Hello, so day 2 of the 66-day challenge to do the right thing. This is going to be a video around the some of the things that I'm building, like this thing that we can see here, the Excel spreadsheet. This is going to be like a habit tracker, which I'm going to be trying to use in conjunction with some of the psychological and neuroscientific research, which I'm going to be talking a bit about later on. I'm going to be trying to implement some of those different things. So for example, here we've got a couple of different sort of scores that I'm going to be giving different activities. So this one is around like the self-report habit index, and this is something that I've modified slightly from the one that's in the paper. Adding some things like doing this is totally new to me. I've done this a few times, and so we've got some at the lower end of this scale, whereas in the in the actual paper, it's not quite in the same as this, but I kind of wanted to include that just so I can see that change over time, really going from not like this is just completely new to me to this is who I am, and I feel like they're kind of two ends of that spectrum. Then we've got difficulty level, and that's kind of how challenging the thing actually is. So I'm hoping, if I can, to try and map something where the difficulty will decrease as the habit decreases. That's kind of my hypothesis, that the difficulty will decrease as habit decreases, and then as habit increases. And similarly, we've got like 3 different emotional levels. So we've got some little emojis to indicate what I'll be kind of maybe feeling, and we've got pre-action, inaction, and post-action, and um, hopefully I'll be able to record these. I'm not sure quite how it's going to work, because I think like when you're in the action, there will be a change in emotion, which I'll have to somehow record. I might have multiple in-action emotional levels and things like that, and kind of see if I can correlate the difficulty and the level of habit with my emotional level. So, for example, like, is it more rewarding for me in terms of like, do I feel maybe like stars in my eyes post action if the thing that I've done is very difficult, um, or is it easier and I feel stars in my eyes, or like if it's really new to me. Do I like feel like in the moment or before the moment I feel more excited towards it, whereas once it's more habitual, it's not as like pre-action, it's not as like high emotion, but maybe in action it's very satisfying or something like that, and kind of see how personally for me how difficulty and habitu- habituaticity or automaticity or habitualness, I would be better to say, will impact on my kind of emotional level. I think that's going to be really fascinating to do. And yeah, um, some of the people that I'm going to be doing this with have already asked me to sort of share some of this, so I'm definitely happy to share the Excel document. At the moment, it's like not even close to done. I can share it now if you'd like. Just let me know. But um, at the moment, yeah, it's like not even close. Like I've got the first day recorded. So yesterday, I've got that kind of recorded around here, and the things that I did yesterday, and then I've got like the things that I've done today, kind of like not really recorded correctly, and I'm still figuring out how to even work Excel properly. I'm trying to make like submit buttons and things like that, so you can press the button for each day, and then it would put it into this data table, and you'd be able to kind of do that, which would be pretty cool. Um, there's going to be loads of different things that I need to figure out, but I'm getting through it. But these are all the different things that I'm going to be tracking at the moment. There might be more, there might be less in the end. Um, but these are going to be kind of the different sort of habits almost, or the different sub habits that I'd like to develop. Um, the main habit is simply being that I'm doing the right thing, and it's like I'm making those right choices. When I know there's kind of an option to do something maybe I shouldn't do, I kind of take that right one. So um, then yeah, that's what I'm hoping really, and I think that's going to be kind of the main thing that I'm going to be tracking. But partially, I'm going to actually be tracking it through these. So for example, something like journaling and reading and meditation. as well as doing like side projects instead of like just burning time procrastinating. Um, like all of these things, as well as all the rest of them, will kind of indicate, like on average, I'd say, my willingness to do the right thing. And I think if I can actually improve all of those scores, that will be kind of like an indication that um, there is some level of increase in my willingness and ability to do the right thing in lots of different areas, which is the aim or the ultimate habit that I'm trying to build. Um, and that just to become, I mean, automatic. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, so that's the Excel spreadsheet. I'll jump on to um, the the different psychology and stuff that I've been looking at recently. But just one last thing on this. So I'm going to be adding like lots of different like projects in terms of like what tasks and things I need to do, and hopefully linking them in. I think, to be honest, I'm going to be developing this throughout the entire 66 days. I think this is going to be one of the um, biggest kind of side projects that I'm going to be sort of doing throughout this time. Um, or well, maybe I've got it in work, but yeah, let's like so like coding and building things like is here. Maybe I'll move that into side projects. I'm not sure yet, but because none of this is really set in stone at the moment. So yeah, like I do think I'm going to be working on it a lot, but really happy to share this document if people want it now or if people want it when it's more developed. Again, either way, I'm happy to share it. But at the moment, I feel like it's a little bit clunky. It's a bit kind of tailor made for me, and I understand it, but maybe it might not be as understandable for other people. Nevertheless, though, happy to share. Um, and anyway, so let's move swiftly on to this research. So um, this is what I spent quite a long time yesterday doing this, a couple of hours. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Spent some more hours this morning doing it. And really trying to wrap my head around a subject area that I don't know anywhere near enough about, but still fascinated by. So to start with, this is the um, like a really important paper for this kind of challenge that I'm doing. So I was talking to one of my friends, Fran. Shout outs to Fran, and a gleeker as well. But she'd like gone to go to the gym or something. But then Fran and I were chatting, and she mentioned about like this paper, or like one of the statistics from it, where it takes 66 days on average for people to um, build a habit. So here the average model time to plateau in the sample was 66 days, but it ranged from this to this. And then that was compared to other bits in the literature, and basically you said it was like much longer. And this paper was like really influential. It was quite seminal. So the 66 days is not necessarily fully accepted, but it's kind of acknowledged as a good, reasonable like amount of time. Like it's even though the small study was quite small, it does acknowledge as well as like a very wide gap or difference between the different things, and that is discussed a bit later on here, around here. So it's like given that exercising can be considered more complex than eating or drinking, this supports the proposal that complexity of the behavior impacts the development of automaticity. um, I love that word. It's so great, right? But we can kind of see this a little bit here. So doing sit-ups might be considered more complicated or more complex than doing a 10-minute walk. So obviously that's going to take longer to build this automaticity over time. So the plateau is obviously going to be much later for here, whereas you kind of hit that plateau there. But the one thing that if we do notice this, um, I think this is potentially quite interesting as well. Like if we look at the level of automaticity. One second, my alarm's going off. Um, sorry. If we look at the level of automaticity, we actually get some pretty interesting kind of results here. So the level here is stabilized around like let's say 35 or something for that one approximately. Um, Whereas the level for 35 here, there's still like an angle on that. So potentially, I don't know if this is right, and based on some of the things that we're going to be discussing later on, there could be some inference that this may be the case. But things that are more complex, or I'll make an argument for later, more stressful, may actually become more habitual. Um, and so this here, like even though we've got the sort of the same time scale, 84 days, I think this study was, this is actually higher. Even though doing the sit-ups has taken longer to get to that point, Like, so it was much slower curve up. This is quite steep here, and obviously this is, but really curves, and but the actual plateau itself is higher. So potentially there could be an argument to be made that complex things, although they take longer to become habitual, once they are habitual, they are like it's more automatic to do that. So that's a really interesting idea. To be honest, that's fascinating to me because that means that it is almost like even more of a motivation to try and do things that are complex and try to because something like doing the right thing, that is, to me, it's on some sense it's quite a simple thing in terms of it's there's not really much choice and it kind of distills a lot of choice because it's like often you'll know what the right thing is. Like you'll know that, oh, I shouldn't do this or I should do that. Like I shouldn't um I don't know, just wake up and immediately eat like a full cake, but I should probably go for a run. It's kind of like that sort of thing. Um so like there's a lot of simplicity there, but at the same time it's quite complex and demanding to actually do that in as many walks of life as possible. And so if that is fully developed or over time if that is continued to work on, like to sorry, if that is continued to put work into, or if that is continually worked on, sorry, then there's potential that that could actually become more habitual than something that would be easy to do, which is fascinating. That's amazing. Anyway, so going on a bit more and talking about how habits are formed. So, this is quite a nice paper. These two did this. I think it's Gardner and LALLY. Yeah. And Gardner, I think, is quite big in motivation and things like that. And I've seen some of his stuff before, and it's pretty good. So this is one of his more recent papers, 2017, I think. And this is really nice. So it kind of breaks down habit formation into four different factors, and it's not that you necessarily should use this for habit formation. Like that, it doesn't say that this is like the way you should think about habits when you're trying to form them yourself. So maybe it's not fully appropriate for what I'm doing, but I haven't found anything else which is better or more suitable or more kind of accurate from what I can gather. Um, because this seems to be very on point. To be honest, we've got like the deciding to act initially, which I've already kind of done, and then the self-regulating, which is kind of like being autonomous and actually being able to like start the action once you've decided to do it. Um, and then we've got repeating the behavior, which is quite interesting, and that's like motivation over time. And then we've got developing cue association. So that's like basically having context. Um, and there's a really nice explanation of this in this review paper here. So it actually goes into it and explains it really nicely. I'll put all of the links and stuff to all of these papers into the description, so please check those out. So we've got phase one, phase two is pre-initiation, occurring before the first enactment of behaviour. Oh, what have I done? Why did I do that? What a numpty. Um, okay, cool, back. Um, so yeah, 1, 2 is pre-initiation, first enactment, and then 3, 4 that's post-initiation. So that's after you've done the action first, and these are addressing motivational and volitional elements need to sustain the behaviour after initial performance, which is 3, and effect of repetition on habitual associations, part 4. Um, so this is really interesting, and especially this here, and there's lots of research supporting this. Phase 3 is that period where you've started, but you can't make it into a habit. So this if you think about this in this way, um, Fran I think used a really nice analogy to describe this, and not necessarily knowing the research, but still absolutely perfect illustration. She was talking about like New Year's when everybody starts on like New Year, New Me, and then they would go and they'd like do something new, maybe like it's eating healthy or exercising or whatever it might be. But then midway through January, everybody sort of stops, and like you get huge amounts of gym memberships, and then it kind of stops, that kind of thing. Um, and that right there is phase 3. It's like that's that period where it's like you've started, you've got that initial willpower and initial motivation to do it, but then it gets to the point where that kind of wanes down and you don't have anything to keep you going to bridge you to that point of habit. again, we'll be talking a little bit more about like that kind of process a little bit later on, and sort of how long that time scale might be. But mid-January seems to be kind of reasonable for some of the reasons we'll discuss a bit later. But nevertheless, um, trying to actually bridge that gap is one of the biggest issues that personally I've had, and I think a lot of other people have had when actually trying to form good habits. So that's actually exactly why I'm doing these videos, because that is like an external social pressure which I've autonomously or selectively applied to myself. So it's not like someone's kind of taking this and forcing it on me. Like I've voluntarily done it, so it doesn't compromise my own kind of like autonomy basically, and that's great. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, because I think that's the kind of thing where even though at some point I'm gonna like not want to do this, it's like, yeah, but I've made a commitment to all of you and my like basically all of my Facebook friends that I'm gonna do this, and if I don't, there's a level of humiliation there. Um, and even though it's self-inflicted, it's still something that uh, is very real. It's very real. So um, yeah, so that's that. And then if we look a little bit further down here, we can look at there's any variable can promote habit formation in one of four ways. So enhance motivation or action control. They're one and two. We're kind of already a little bit past those, but for other people, maybe this would be kind of like motivational speakers, that kind of thing, or action control is kind of like having the capabilities and the competence to be able to do that and stuff like that. Um, and then there's some papers and stuff here that you can obviously have a little bit more of a look at. Um, but then this one is quite nice around the modification of the motivation. Similarly is what I've been saying before, but then there's the next one on strengthening cue behavior associations. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing is using music really, really heavily to try and actually build associations with certain sounds and certain kind of habits that I'm basically going to be trying to form. So, for example, um, every day that I'm going to wake up and go for a run, or that's my plan, then I'm gonna have a certain song that I'll like use as my alarm for that day, and then that's gonna hopefully over time build up that natural habit where it'll get to the point where I'll I'll just think, oh sorry, I'll just wake up and hear the song and I won't even think, and I'll just immediately start going for a run, and it'll just be like the natural thing to do when I hear that sound. And similarly, gonna try and do other things kind of similar to that, where I'm doing like work and stuff like that, and I'll have certain levels like types of music or certain playlists, that kind of thing. Um, on that I'm going to be using, and like kind of repeatedly almost trying to ingrain the sound association in my mind and make it so it's a really, really strong connection. um, this this paper is really, really cool. It's got like so many different things in to talk about, but um, I just wanted to move on to something else here. So this is the self-report habit index, which I talked a bit about before. That's in the Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to be using a modified version of this, as I mentioned, to kind of track um, how effectively I am building a habit effectively. So that'll be really nice. And then we talk a bit more about the different parts of the brain that actually form habits and kind of how that bit all works. And this is quite fascinating to me. I think this is absolutely amazing. To think this is all going on in our heads, it's wild. But there's the three main sort of things, from what I can see, that are related to habit, and that's the hypothalamus, the basal ganglia, and the amygdala. I probably said those terribly, but whatever. Um, so this is the hypothalamus, and this is to do more with food habits, I think. So you have the habit of eating and reproduction while in medial preoptic regions, and then cardiovascular control as a response to stress. And we'll be coming on to stress shortly. Um, so this one I think is fascinating. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know much about any of this, but this one I definitely need to do more research on, because it's something that seems to be really relevant, but I still haven't quite cracked how I can implement that knowledge into a way which might be helpful. However, in the basal ganglia, that's something which I've kind of figured something out a little bit here. So this is, and there's the thalamus, like, which is obviously related to the hypothalamus, but nevertheless, like, so this is, it's kind of all part of the this kind of same circuitry. But effectively, in this paper, I think it basically came out that this helped to, like, the basal ganglia helps to form habits, often using dopamine, and that's like the dopamine circuitry, which is visualized here. We've got like this bit of dopamine coming in here, which comes and interacts with the stratum, and then this actually then goes on to influence the rest of the parts. So this is quite interesting because I've seen a lot before about kind of dopamine addiction and like using things like social media or um, effectively like just burning up your resource of dopamine in like artificial ways. So maybe it would be like, for me it was always like playing games or something like that, where it's not really something that's actually giving you a reward. It kind of artificially gives you one, and therefore you get the dopamine hit, so you feel good, but it's not actually, you're not actually like getting that reward. So then you kind of train your brain almost to respond well to that simply by like the fact that you do it repeatedly. Um, and then when it actually comes to needing that dopamine hit for the right things, so for example, for me, it's like I would need that moving towards goals that are actually going to help my life and like actually going to be good for me. Then I don't have that as much. Like, firstly, I've kind of got circuitry which is wired differently, so it's more towards things that are like much more short term. For example, games are like way quicker. It's like instant, or like social media. You go on and you like instantly can get hits of dopamine like so quickly, and that's like not very great, really, in terms of actually then trying to use that same circuitry to do proper things. It kind of like fucks with it in some sense, I guess. Um, and it's just not really great. But so that's really interesting. So dopamine, and so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to actually decrease my consumption of games, and like I've deleted all my games at the moment. I'll probably reinstall them like at the end of the 66 days, but I'm going to sort of see how it goes. Just doing a bit of a dopamine kind of fast, and really try and use social media at a minimum, and only use it when I'm doing something sort of that's beneficial. So for example, instead of watching just like random trash YouTube videos, I've been watching things more around like psychology and philosophy, so it's more like beneficial, and there's actually some learning that I'm gaining there. Um, so it's kind of reallocating or trying to rewire my dopamine circuitry, so it's more towards longer term, actually beneficial things, rather than it being artificially wired to seek towards like short, maybe unrealistic or artificial goals. And then if we talk a little bit more about the amygdala, similarly, this is fascinating. So the dorsal stratum plays a pivotal role in both of these learning processes. These are learning like goal directed, and then there is what's it called? So it's goal directed, and then the other one is performance of habit. So they're like the two different types. And effectively, what this bit's saying, if you can explain it better than me, that's class. I don't know if I'll be able to explain it well, to be honest. So apologies. Um, but what it seems to say is that, firstly, dopamine, um, like if it's there, then um, it enables habits to be formed more. Whereas if it's not there, it enables like it. So sorry, let me just go through. So it blocks the plasticity of the dorsal medium stratum and abolish the acquisition of this. So this is if it blocks the plasticity of that, then you can't acquire or perform goal directed actions. And then when there's no or when there's liaison or inactivation of the dorsal stratum or of its dopamine afferents from that, that blocks the acquisition and performance of habits. So, um, so what I think this means, don't know if this is right, please correct me if it's wrong, um, is that if this bit's damaged, then, or if this isn't plastic, then you can't have an acquisition and performance of goal-directed actions, and if dopamine isn't about, then you can't have acquisition and performance of habits. And then, if we then go on to this paper, we look at what dopamine does in terms of in terms of learning. So when it's goal directed, dopamine may play a dual role in addition to its action on synaptic plasticity. So that, if we remember back in here, is basically that's around the goal directed actions. So we need dopamine effectively to have the part of our brain be plastic so it can change effectively. That's what plasticity seems to mean. And if we don't have that, we can't acquire or perform goal-directed actions, which is obviously what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do here is try and make goal-directed actions into habits. That's like the goal-directed action is do the right thing, and then we're trying to make that into a habit. So we need the dopamine there to start with to be able to enable the plasticity, so we can actually do that to start with to actually get those goal-directed actions going. But then if we continue on, it gets even more exciting because dopamine modulates the excitability of these neurons. So what this seems to mean is that if we look at voltage dependent and receptor oriented ion channels, so basically the brain works with a lot of like chemical and electrical impulses, and that's the voltage dependent and receptor operated ion channels. So ions, like that's like chemical, and then voltage is obviously like the electrical almost. And this is quite a simple way to look at it, but to me it works for me, and um, we can kind of like distill some ideas from this and still manage to potentially take some things that might work. So um, it's suitable for me. So basically, the modulating the excitability kind of means like the efficacy. So um, basically, dopamine like sets how strongly something would react to a voltage change or an ion change. Does that make sense? So it's kind of um, basically dopamine sets how quickly or like how intensely you react. So if we look further down, accordingly during early stages of learning, disruptions to dopamine transmission are likely to impair behavioral performance by disrupting the throughput of information. So basically, if there's no dopamine in early stages of learning, you can't perform as well because the information can't be communicated as well because the dopamine sort of stops that from really being as reactive. And then with training, um, this can like the relationship between input and output can become tighter. So that's like they respond more accurately to each other. So this is exactly why we don't want to be messing with our dopamine circuitry by using things like social media excessively or like doing things that are giving us dopamine hits or dopamine-esque rewards without actually having any reward with it, because that effectively changes how close the relationship is between input and output of the of our synapses which use dopamine. That like I know that sounds very like crazy, but to me that's what it seems to mean. It's like it literally like decreases how efficient our brain is at understanding what our brain is doing. Like I don't know that I want to do that. Like that doesn't sound great to me. Um, but then if we continue on, it's very interesting. This may correspond the apparent decreasing role of dopamine in response expression with extended training. So this effectively means, as I think it says further on, so dopamine mediated LTP during learning contributes to the shift of S to R mode performance, so stimulus response mode performance. Um, so it's like this is habit. So stimulus response. That's not like that isn't like you like thinking about that. That's just like it, you just do it. So the with extended training, dopamine mediated LTP. Not sure what LTP means. Well, let's just move on for a second. So because dopamine agonist treatment during learning speeds, this shift process. So basically, more dopamine increases the habituation or like the automatic automatication. I mean, habituation sounds better. So habituation of uh, of things which were previously goal directed. So not only does dopamine make your brain more plastic and actually enable you to do goal directed activities in the first place, but then it actually helps with the conversion from goal directed actions to stimulus response actions. And so this is the habit. So it changes from goal directed. So it enables goal directed firstly, and then once you've got a goal directed action, it then helps to convert that to habit. And so that's like absolutely vital, like completely vital to everything that I'm trying to achieve here. Because like firstly I need the goal directed actions, and I need to be able to identify and pick those actions which I'm then gonna try and turn into good habits. But then actually converting them into habits is then the next priority. And so we need dopamine very, very heavily in that. And I think um, even though it's 66 days, and I think I'd like to try the idea of just not really polluting my mind, or at least polluting it in a minimal way compared to my previous experience um, with like dopamine changing activities. So I can kind of see basically if my mind is super clear and it's super focused, like how does it actually work? Like, is my mind actually just always going to be like it is now, or if it's super clear and super focused and the dopamine pathways are really trained to actually focus on goal orientated things, will that become much more habitual and much more easy for me? Which sounds pretty cool if it does. Now we go on to the next thing, which is on cortisol. This is fascinating as well. And this is mind blowing, to be honest. But basically, this is all about how cortisol actually um, changes, or like stress more than anything, how that actually changes um, the way that you would behave. And so in this one, this is on stress prompting habit behavior in humans. Um, so stress before training in the instrumental task rendered participants' behavior insensitive to the change in the value of the food outcomes. That is stress led. That is stress led to habit performance. So stress leads to habit. But that makes sense, right? So if you're in a stressful situation, so cortisol, the way it seems to work, I don't know if this is fully accurate, but in my simple understanding, it shuts down the things that are not necessary, and it just focuses on kind of preservation and doing like the very, very basic things. And it's obviously going to be way easier to do something which is habitual, because you don't have to think about it. You don't have to like decide, oh, should I do that? It's way easier to do that than it is to think about something new when you're in a stressful situation. So then, um, so then we also can see that here we go. So moreover, stress reduces subject explicit knowledge of the action outcome contingencies. So the results demonstrate for the first time that stress promotes habit at the expense of goal-directed performance in humans. So this seems to mean that if you're under stress, um, you'll be more habitual, but then it actually decreases the goal-directed thing, which is somewhat negative. So we don't want to be too stressed. We just want to have like enough stress to be able to capitalize on the positive habitual benefits. And the in this one it talks about like the habit formation. So this actually increases the present findings suggest that the time course of development of healthy habits depends on the time of day, and the effect is mediated through diurnal diurnal I think diurnal variation in cortisol. That diurnal just means like daily, effectively, or like circadian. It's like the same sort of thing. Variation in cortisol levels. So if we look here, this is super cool. It's effectively showing that in the mornings, this is like the building like habit, like the speed that you build habit. Um, so this is the effectively this is how fast you build the habit. And so in the morning, when there's higher cortisol levels, which is like the stress hormone, you would actually build habits faster. And this is somewhat significant, I'd say, because this is like, say we're going for 66 days, that's around here maybe. um that's probably like 57, 58, let's say, percent, or whatever this kind of sort of measurement is. Obviously it's around out of 100, those percentage might not be a negative or a bad comparison. And then if we compare that in the evening to the morning, which is around like 70%, that's like a whole like 10% or 10 of this scale um, more, which like seems to be like a much greater response. And if we were to try and achieve that in the evening, we'd have to have spent like an extra 30 days to do that. So that's quite flabbergasting to me. That's really quite intense. And so one of the things that I've been doing, I did it today, just before I started doing this, and it's actually already, I'm like loving it. Is midway through the day having a cold shower, and that is something which in this study they use cold water. You put your hands in cold water to release like a stress response. Um, so if I can then effectively artificially release a stress response, then not only will I be more habitual in that case, but I'll also be able to build habits more in that case. Obviously, if it's like too excessive and I like give myself hypothermia, that's not going to help. But if it's something which is just enough to stimulate my cortisol levels to get to a sort of good level, rather than being negative or being kind of naturally waning, then I'll be able to almost like restart my day and kind of have the same kind of potentially the same kind of level of habit development that I have in the morning in the evening. So it will be much more efficient. And so, um, yeah, that's kind of the idea. And then a little bit about norepinephrine or noradrenaline. That's what that's how you say it in the UK, but norepinephrine or something. I don't know. So noradrenaline. Um, this is another stress hormone, and this is released similarly, like it would be released with things like cold, or the like stressful stimulus, and as a result, this actually helps with different parts of arousal, attention, um, mood, learning, and memory. So this is, and obviously the stress response and stuff. So this is quite fascinating because potentially I can have a cold shower midway through the day, and it can increase my attention, it can increase my mood, which it has today 100%. It increases how fast I can learn and my memory, as well as increasing the how fast I develop habits and how habitual I would be. So effectively, I think like having um an intentionally stressful or an autonomously stressful um experience midway through the day will be firstly an integral part of this 66 days for me, but also it seems to be very, very powerful in terms of actually making you as an individual, or me as an individual, I should rather say, um, it could help me to actually fulfill and do the things that I'd want to do, because all of these like memory, learning, attention, mood, like the, I mean, if I can have a cold shower and all of those things improve, that's class. That's so good. And then if I can then on top of that build habits which are good, because when you're in a good mood, you're more likely to build a good habit. You're more likely to go and take that step and do the behavior that you might not want to normally do. And if you've got um your attention's focused and you can remember to do those things, like all of this is just going to be basically enhancing the way that um I'm actually going to be working in the world. Hopefully, that's the thought at least. So as I said, yeah, just in sort of summary, I'm gonna be having like a dopamine fast, if you will. Like I'm not gonna be playing games anywhere near as much. I'm just gonna be using YouTube for productive things and not trying to procrastinate at all. At any time that I feel like I'm really bored or I really want to do something procrastinating, I'm just gonna meditate. And so hopefully that's not gonna be releasing and messing with my dopamine circuitry, so I can allow that to sort of reset and I can get to the point where I can build it so it's actually targeted towards good things. And then on top of that, I'm going to be using music to um, build cues. So I'm going to be using certain songs and associate those songs with certain activities in order to hear that song and then do that activity autonomously later down the line, or that's the aim at least. And then I'm going to be having cold showers midway through the day in order to reset my cortisol levels and create a bit of autonomous stress in order to like improve all of the things that I've talked about with noradrenaline, as well as increase my habitual behavior and the rate of habit conversion. Um, One point that I just did want to talk about is the thing that I mentioned in January, people often would quit sort of in midway through January. If we look at this, this is a really nice illustration of that. So this kind of stage here, so we've maybe got like, it'd be so great if there was like motivation mapped on this same graph. I think that would be so fascinating. But if we had like the day one, that's when you're gonna have these nice like intentions, like you really want to do it. But then this stage three, as we talked about in this one, and like the stage three, the critical period, that is so nicely illustrated here, where it's like the habit hasn't really started forming until around day 21 or so. So that is something that firstly I'm going to be aiming a bit towards, kind of a third of the way through this 66 days. I'm going to be probably diving a bit more into this research and kind of reviewing a lot of it, seeing basically how the progress is going. Do I think I've built any habits? Like when I'm tracking it on my Excel spreadsheet, like has it become more, has it become easier to do? Like, is it just as difficult? Am I enjoying it in a different amount? And then tracking that through, and then around at 40 and then 60, we'll hopefully see some quite stark differences in the experience, if anything, if this graph is anything to go by, and hopefully we'll be able to bridge that phase 3 gap, and actually build some really good habits. But yeah, I know this video has been super long, 40 minutes of um, pretty crazy research and stuff that I've very poorly explained, but hopefully it's been helpful, and at least interesting. So I'm going to do a little separate video for my sort of daily update, and I'm going to upload this one to YouTube. And then I'll just put my daily updates on Facebook, and then the bigger videos just on there, because I want to have like bigger descriptions and stuff like that, and I don't want to be spamming people with 40-minute videos, because that seems like probably it would be an optional thing if you don't want to watch that. But yeah, so thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, cool. Bye.